Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, I picked myself something up from the Gibson mod collection. So if you're not familiar with them, we document it every week. They just do some really weird finishes, they do some customizations. Sometimes they get really crazy, other times they're just kind of mild. It's fun to see what they do. But every once in a while, one of them speaks to me and I decide that we should check it out on the show. And that's exactly what happened to this 1959 ES-335 reissue. Because not only does it have a really cool custom color finish that I like on this thing, I don't think I've ever actually tried to review a year-specific 335. Like, we've had a couple of 335s on the show, but this one is a reissue of the 1959 year for the 335. And if you don't know, 1958 was the first year for the 335, but they didn't quite have the neck angle and stuff right yet, so 59 is the most desirable specs of all that. So let's go ahead and crack this one open and see what is in here. It's a nice pale alien green. Kind of has like vintage 50s, 60s specs to it, like some of those cheaper knockoff guitars. I mean, check out my Arterial Satin burst to get some additional vibes. But man, I'm really digging this in person. I'm glad I took the plunge on this one because, you know, some of these reissues, they're very expensive. This one was $5,500 through the demo shop, but one of these brand new from Gibson's actually $6,000. But you can't choose this color, so I thought it deserved at least a $500 premium. But oh yeah, they did the sides. I was hoping they would do the sides. The only thing I was a little bit iffy on this one is they just did a flat burst on the back of the neck. I like it better when it's more rounded over and then you have like a black edge right here, but it's something else that makes this one unique and different. Nice, even the sides of the headstock. I could have seen them omitting that, so hey, demo shop guy who refinished this one. Great job. I like it. Because I actually saw a Firebird in this finish once before. It wasn't within the mod collection or anything. It was just a custom order. We checked that out in this Rock or Not episode. But besides the cool finish, I thought, why don't we learn a little bit about 335s? You can find all the detailed information in this video, but let's talk reissues. On Gibson's website, you can currently find a 59, a 61, and a 1964 reissue. They're all $6,000, so it's not necessarily like a Les Paul, where there's a 54, a 56, a 57, a 58, and a 60 that all have very specific specs and price points associated with them. These 335s are more so what kind of specs do you like? So I already talked about the first year being 58, and then they kind of got everything right in 59. What makes a 59 interesting is the fact that they have this really obnoxiously long pickguard. Back in the day, they would have PAFs, and they would have a stop bar tailpiece, and they would have some pretty chunky necks. So then you move to the 61s. You have very similar specs with the dot necks, the stop bar tailpiece, but there's a few other small things that change, like the neck profile on those. But in 64, that's when a lot more differences happen, like you get the block inlays introduced on those. And again, neck spec changes, so it all comes down to personal preference on these guys. I find it strange that they don't have like a custom shop 66 reissue, like with the really skinny narrow nut width and the chrome hardware and the trapeze tailpiece. That seems to just be something that's missing. Generally, those are less desirable by collectors, but surely there's some players that want those out there. But maybe it just comes down to it would be cheaper for them to buy a vintage one, because pre-75 335s are pretty expensive. So if you're one of those guys that only has to have vintage original colors, what if I told you this? There actually is a custom ordered 1964 that I learned about very recently thanks to a fan of the show. It's a very similar finish. It's a little bit darker, but I think it's because it's aged a little bit more, and it has a more teardrop shaped burst, and it's a 64, so it has the block inlays. But you'll notice that one has a Bixby as well, and the fact that this one is supposed to be locked away in Rumbleseat Music's private collection makes me think somebody in the mod collection knows about this guitar and wanted to pay tribute to it. So that's pretty cool to see. So that brings us to this one. It's kind of a weird blending of specs here. So, being a 59, it should have a stop bar tailpiece. And when I first purchased this, I was like, well, where did it go? How on earth did they put a Bixby on this thing and not have any stop bar tailpiece holes left? That would have been cool if they could have put a custom made plaque on this one. But, you know, now that I think about it, they probably just filled them in and they're hiding underneath this solid colored refinish. It's possible that in a few years, witness lines could start showing up. But you've got the Bixby to make it special. You've got the unique finish to make it interesting. And lastly, they swapped out our custom buckers for MHS pickups, which stands for Memphis Historic Specs. They're just still trying to use those up after shutting that factory down. So First impressions of this thing, it's way heavier than I was expecting. Like, this body is really chunky for a 335. A lot of it probably comes down to the Bigsby Vibrola here, because that adds a decent amount of weight, but even just within the body, I can tell this one's a little bit chunkier. Oh, that's a really cool touch too. I wonder if that's part of the 59 reissue, is the fact that we have these little white button straps. Those are cute. But I'm really happy that this was a full-on gloss refinish, because that just makes this whole green alien burst vibe extra cool. Another thing that makes this nice, and something I wasn't actually even expecting, is the fact that the reissue one gets the Lifton style 335 case, which is a step above the regular cases that they would have in here. So it's got the pink interior, double neck rest on this one. I'm not sure if that's historically accurate for these or not, but it looks like it got a spare amber switch tip in there. I think I'll leave the cream alone though. All of our normal paperwork here, and a new COA for this one with serial number A92194. So I believe that might make it a 2019. I'm not 100% sure on these. So to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take a look at its individual parts and specs. Inside our snotty little friend here, let's find out. What do we got in here? Is it the actual MHS pickups as they advertised? Well, they wrote Memphis on it, so hopefully. You can see your patent applied for decal there, and the same thing is present for our bridge pickup. But take a look at this. It's like extra minty green inside the pickup cavities. And the reason for that is the finish over top of this is actually slightly aged. You see how this is yellow? All of this has been slightly yellowed. So this would have initially started a little bit more like what you would see in here, like that mint chocolate chip style ice cream. Oh man. That would have been cool if they would have had little black speckles within the finish. I know it would be an acquired taste, kind of like a green kiwi at the same time, but yeah, that would have been interesting. As far as construction goes, it's pretty basic. You've got your maple poplar maple top that's sandwiched together, then you get the spruce bracing, then you have a maple center block, and then you get the same that's on the top here as on the back. Then you've got the kerfing along the edges. I think we've seen inside enough 335s that we don't need to bother to break out the endoscope today. And the serial number is located in the base side F-hole, A92194. You can see the style 335 Guitar TD. As far as those pickups within the circuit for fun, the middle position is 3.95 k ohms. Our bridge pickup reads 7.87 k ohms, and our neck position is 7.91 k ohms. But we definitely have some aged nickel covers over top of those pickups, so they work pretty well with this slightly aged finish. But now we get the true ABR1. So regular 335s won't have the straight up ABR1 bridge. Those ones will have the bushings within the body. They're the more Nashville style ones. They might have an ABR1 on top, but they're not mounted traditionally. But here you can see that ABR1 that is currently on this one. And then as of right now, I'm not seeing any of those witness lines I was alluding to earlier that you might see eventually. I mean, I guess it's also possible this just left the factory in the first place as a Bigsby variation, like maybe it was some sort of a custom order that went wrong. Sometimes there are interesting stories behind these Mod Shop, the collection ones. Like a couple weeks ago, we had a blue R7, and that actually ended up being a Japan exclusive custom run, but something was wrong with it, so it stayed back. But anyways, here's how you mount a Bigsby to a guitar. You do 2 big drill bits right here, and then you get 4 screws down here securing it to the guitar. Bigsbys typically get these little felt pads, and like if you get a B7 Vibramate unit or something similar, I would actually suggest not using the pads, because look what the pads do to the nitro finish. They impress it. I mean, this was a brand new finish, and it's already showing marks of all that. Now, that doesn't matter in the slightest, unless you plan on converting this into a stop bar tailpiece, then you're going to have all these holes and everything. But the whole point of the Vibramate units are you're supposed to be able to take them on and off again. I mean, that's not what this one is. This is meant to be a permanent system. But the way these things work, just in case you've never had one before, they're a big pain in the butt to string up. But you put the ball end of the string on right here, and then you wrap it around there. And then after it goes over top of that, it needs to go under this tension bar, and then it goes to your bridge. And then there's a little spring over here that compresses right here. That's what gives you your little warble effect, because those black posts start to move then, which your strings would then be attached to. Before we continue on, let's just appreciate this avocado burst finish that's going on here. I'm definitely glad I gave this one a chance. I like it a lot better in person, especially when you can like appreciate it from the side profile view. I mean, they really went all out making this thing look vibey. Now there's a few things that I think they could have done better. We'll take a look at that here on the sides in a minute. But you've got 2 volumes here and 2 tones. You have the historic style, nice golden top hat style knobs right there. Nothing fancy with your 3-way toggle switch, but when you take your pick guard off, here's what you're left with. It looks like a little bit of scuffing right here just because the body kind of bulges up in that area, so the pick guard kind of hits it. I don't know, this thing almost pulls off being pick guardless. It gives it an even more country vibe for some reason for me. But anyways, here's what that giant pick guard looks like. It appears to be 5-ply. Black, white, black, white, black. So moving on from the maple poplar maple body, we move on to our mahogany neck and rosewood fretboard. We've got our dot inlays because, again, that's just a spec of the 59 reissue. In fact, the 335s are one of the weird guitars where dots are seen as a premium because they came on the original models. And like the more and more you learn about 335 history, the more you understand that. But for me personally, I kind of like the block inlays because they're just a little bit fancier. That's why I like things like the 345 that got fancier inlays, as well as the 355 you can check out in this video. But a nice touch about the historic version is you actually get the red side marker inlays. Now what are those? That's something that the old Kalamazoo plant used to do. It's the tortoiseshell markers. So that's something that makes like a historic Les Paul special too. Now, for some reason, because this guitar is like a mint green finish, they stand out exquisitely well. So that was pretty cool to see. But scale length is typical 24 3/4 with a 12-inch fretboard radius. We've got a nylon nut that measures 1.69 inches and increases to 2.06 by the 12th. First fret neck depth, we're rocking 0.92, pretty chunky. And yeah, that rounds up to 0.97 by the 12th. Here's that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Starting with our truss rod, that's what it looks like direct from the factory. And then look at this. So it's yellowed over, but since the rest of the guitar is green, it just kind of makes it look greenish. Same thing with like these tuner tips. So the whole yellow and green phenomenon, it's very fascinating on this guitar. I like the color scheme. But you've probably been noticing that this whole finish has been VOS, which stands for Vintage Original Spec. They're trying to make it look like an old guitar that's just sat in its case. So it's going to have some sort of a haze, maybe some light picking scratches and whatnot. There's a good look at the haziness I was talking about. So if you like guitars that look clean, you probably don't want VOS. But if you've been noticing those scratches and dullness to the finish, that is intentional by Gibson. Moving on to the backside. Not too much to go over here because we don't have any control plate access. In case you're confused how they get things in here, they just fish it through the F-holes and the bridge pickup hole. So you can get most of the wiring harness through there, and then it gets in through there, and then, yeah, you can fish it through. Check out Saving Grandpa's Guitar review if you want to see me painstakingly go through that. It's not so bad once you know what you're doing, but if it's your first time, it's definitely going to be a task. But again, you've got your cool strap button on the bottom and right here by the heel. It's just a nice avocado burst finish here. But now what I was alluding to earlier, the finish work is actually quite sloppy in the cutaways. Like you can actually see a green area right here, which leads me to believe this entire guitar was probably green at one point in time, and then they add the black spraying, which, you know, makes sense. But when they were scraping the binding or something, they must have took too much off because then you can still see the green. Because at first I thought, oh, sweet, they've got a little green layer right before the black everywhere. But no, that wasn't exactly quite the case. I mean, obviously in the easier areas to get that all taken care of, they did a great job. But in the trickier, more time-consuming areas, there's definitely a little bit of room for improvement there. I'd say the worst spot's definitely right here. And what's really funny to me is you can just feel how thick the paint is, so I'm pretty sure they're just painting over whatever finish it used to be, because there's a pretty visible protruding amount of finish right here. It's kind of funny. They always say, you can't make a neck bigger, you can only make it smaller. I beg to differ, just put a whole bunch of finish on it. But anyways, same thing we were talking about earlier. A green flat bursted neck, and our headstock does have a mod stamp, but there are no serial numbers on these historic ones. They're all in the F-holes. And we've got single line, single ring Kluson tuners. But our last spec to capture is the weight. About 4 kilograms, which is roughly
really only under 9 pounds. That's kind of surprising. 8 pounds, 12.1 ounces. It's incredibly body heavy. I'm sure the Bigsby helps some, but I had the Bigsby off and it was still pretty chunky otherwise. But let's go ahead and hear how it sounds.
Alright, let's go ahead and run through the tones of this beast. First off, this neck pickup is sounding extra dark, which is good for some stuff. Kind of like what I was just playing. That pickup really wants to overdrive my amp though on that clean. Let's go ahead and try our bridge out. Now we'll try that middle position out. Alright, so what I'm noticing is the neck pickup kind of steals the show. Where's the bridge? Sounds like it's gonna be good with a little bit of distortion. But the middle position here, not the chimiest I've ever heard, but I think it's because the neck pickup's kind of overpowering this. I think if I lower that neck pickup just a tad, it might get you a little bit more traditional tones. Now that we know all about the Greenburst 335 59 reissue, what are my final thoughts on this thing? I'm glad I tried out a true historic reissue of one of these 335s because it is a little bit different than like the regular run-of-the-mill Gibson USAs. I mean, if you can really call them that. It's kind of just like, do you want to get a USA Les Paul Standard from like the 50s and 60s collection, or do you want to get a reissue style Les Paul? They're both fantastic guitars, just one costs a lot more money and feels just a little bit better. It's like the law of diminishing returns. This feels a little bit more substantial than some other 335s I've had. Now, some of that could just be placebo due to the fact that this one happens to weigh a little bit more, or at least that's the way it seems to me. But as a Gibson fanatic, it was nice to see like things that I attribute to a Les Paul like reissue style guitar on a 335. It just kind of amped up 335s. Because I've had a fair share of this model by now, but I'm still relatively new as compared to like a Les Paul. So I'm happy I picked this up. I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at this. I'm sure there's some people that are just gonna be like, nope, that finish is not for me in the slightest. But to that I say, I think people just see colors differently. All right, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're interested in being the next owner of this one, you can check it out on my website. Take care.